Welcome once more, all you ladies and animals, to a great breakdown of pitting Destiny and Warhammer against one another. Now, this is a slight repeat, as Tyranids and the Hive have been thrown at each other in the past, but where the two bug-like factions are very similar in terms of etymology, they are not in structure. Versus the Vex, who, like the Tyranids, function as a hive mind of sorts. Each and every atom of the Tyranids works in correspondence with one another, just like the Vex do, operating as cogs of an even greater machine. We've briefly covered the Vex in the full-out Imperium and Vanguard versus each verse video, and the Tyranids in the Bug War. But there are a few things deeper in the context of each of these factions that may elevate them to be perfect enemies. So a few things may be repeated if you've watched all the past Destiny v Warhammer videos, but without waiting around too long, let's get right into the Tyranids. First off, I want to apologize for misinterpreting one of the Swarm's greatest abilities, the Shadow in the Warp, which I took as the Tyranids blocking out the warp entirely by sheer mass of the hive mind's presence. In practice, it's much more of an overwhelming effect rather than a total blackout. But aside from that, let's retrace our basics for the Tyranids, massive, ever-evolving biomechanical fleets of monsters that feast on biomass. Now, the term biomass can get confusing here because it doesn't limit the Tyranid swarm to exclusively carbon-based life forms. It means that anything they can use to generate the energy needed to produce a larger swarm, they will consume. And that does mean everything. Tons and mountains of dirt, fresh with nutrients in the soil, every little insect and worm within, each and every drop of an ocean drinking the planets they come across into dry husks, sucking down the atmosphere and starving the worlds they cross of air, soaking in the sun and presuming the solar energy for their own needs, chomping down on metals and inorganic material which is not even out of the realm for humans. Like Joey from the basement yard, yes, it is surprising to learn that there are literal flakes of iron in your cereal, because we can take that metal compound and turn it into a positive for our bodies. The Tyranids do this too, but to the nth degree. By the time they leave a world, all that is left is a barren husk, as all other biomass is scooped up by the fleet before they move on to the next. They will cover a world in almost a type of acid, literally liquefying the contents to be vacuumed up by the fleet. Energy is built up and expended into an invading force, with more being expended later on if the resistance is enough to warrant it, evolving upwards from small gaunts to the larger screamer killers, phages, and biotitans until the ultimate form of Tyranid perfection, the Tyranid Prime, a creature specifically designed by the hive mind to never lose twice. Whereas other Tyranid forms slowly evolve in small ways to counter a world and its people, such as developing extra layers of fat to live in the snow, fins to swim through swamps, or a tough mucus layer to help defend against the Tau's railgun weaponry during the first invasions of Hive Fleet Gorgon. But the apex, Tyranid Prime, is much more tactical in its design, not only keeping the memories of the previous form, but building itself in a way that perfectly counters what it had fought before. Killed by a salamander, will develop a form that focuses on melting civilians with acid and a thicker hide to make you flame resistant. Killed by an Imperial Knight, create a form that is larger, tankier, and strong enough to rip through the legs of the mechanical beast before devouring it wholesale on the ground. The Tyranid's greatest ability is that of reproduction and evolution, but it can often be a double-edged sword. Even in the example of Hive Fleet Gorgon and the Tau, the trade-off of anti-railgun gaunts meant that the fleet was producing swaths of smaller Tyranids and not enough of the tougher forms that pose a greater threat, leading to their downfall as a legion of Marines came to help the Tau push back the monstrous invaders and destroy the fleet. There's always a trade-off. But the Tyranids can also evolve in interesting ways not bound by pure biology. Yes, claws and teeth and acid and guns that shoot parasites are fantastic, but we've also seen recently how Tyranids have begun to develop and create forms that can use the psychic powers of librarians and other psychers against them, throwing out powerful waves that shut them down. Too much exposure against the Tyranids at any scale, and they will develop a way to defeat you, as it's only a matter of time. A great way to think about the Tyranids is like radiation sickness. Currently, there is no cure. If you're exposed to the demon core, your body just starts to break down. You can't reverse this, you can't fix this, you just have to treat the symptoms. The organ failure, the blood loss, and the damage to your DNA. All you can do is treat the symptoms, but you cannot cure it. Tyranids are much the same. You can't so simply just kill the Tyranids, but you have to fight the symptoms, counter their evolutions, force them against the orcs, blow apart entire worlds that they gather on. Fight the symptoms for as long as you can. For all that we know, they are literally unending, as we have no idea how many of them are actually out there.
I think this is the end of them. A path with no escape. And yet, here they are. There they were, and there they will be. And there they will have been. For them, there is no paradox, there is only the pattern. And the pattern needs the Vex to see it to completion. And so the Vex must be, for the mind of the Vex, is that faith?
The Vex are not just robots, or even milk splooge in robotic frames. The Vex are the end. The definitive final shape that the universe becomes at the end of everything. They want nothing but for everything to be Vex. Now, as we talked about in the last mashup video, the Vex cannot be defeated. They are as inevitable as the churn of time. In fact, they are so inevitable that it's speculated the Gardener, essentially the Light, had introduced paracausal forces into the universe by way of the Traveler and Guardians to throw off the Vex, which is exactly what has happened so far. See, the Vex do not exist in time, or rather they do not perceive time as time. There is not past, present, or future. There is Vex, and there is not Vex. The past is merely a state of the universe when there was not Vex that led to a state of the future where there is Vex. Confusing, I know. We've seen before that the Vex can, quote, delete people from the timeline, which is partially true and not true. It is in a way, but why is it? Well, it's because of the Vault of Glass and Atheon, which is going to be the greatest difference between how this fight goes. See, the Vex can't just pull time trickery nonsense out from nowhere. That's why the Infinite Forest and the Vault were constructed. It's a controlled environment in which the Vex could simulate everything. But causality is a hell of a thing. They could try to eliminate the Traveler from time and space, but doing so may well damn them in the process. Due to the illogical nature of the Light, it had become impossible for the Vex to find which moment in time they could delete the Traveler without removing themselves from time at the same time. I hate time travel paradoxes so much. But inside the Vault, they can simulate everything and anything, allowing them to delete individual Guardians who were trapped within because the laws within the Vault are written by the Vex, rather than following the rules of actual reality beyond it. The whole point of the Guardians going into the Vault of Glass and stopping Atheon was to trip up their plans to expand the Vault so that it could affect the greater universe outside of it. So if this battle between bugs and bots is taking place after the Vault was shut down, then it helps the Tyranid side of things, but that's if the Tyranids can be simulated. I think we have come to the point of a mathematical stalemate. See, the Vex can simulate everything and anything except for paracausality because it simply does not follow logical rules. Solar titans do not gather millions of hydrogen atoms and squish them into a bomb to make a solar grenade. They just summon the solar plasma from nothing and throw it at their feet. They say, "Fuck you, big hammer." It makes no logical sense, and thus the binary operations to the Vex cannot calculate it, outside of the Vault, which runs on their own laws of reality. And the Tyranids, while not paracausal, are definitely hard to predict. You can assume the basics that they will consume and replicate, but that's no different than assuming the basics of a Guardian is to protect humanity. Tyranids may look the same, but genetically are all unique, whether that be for minor differences like maybe 2 different gods have different colored blood, or 5 toes instead of 4, or 36 teeth instead of 30. Each and every Tyranid is a unique amalgamation of biodata, no matter how similar they appear on the surface. In a similar way that Vex can infinitely calculate all of causality, the Tyranids can infinitely change their form on what is basically a whim. Not to mention the Tyranids can evolve in ways that just don't make sense, like them evolving psychopathic powers out of nowhere. One of 2 main scenarios I can see happening is the Vex and Tyranid forces instantly make a 180 on one another. The Vex have infinite time and can just wait out the Tyranids until the heat death of the universe. In the same way that Tyranids avoid Necrons or Chaos, they may also just agree to leave the Vex alone. If a few of their caste get burnt alive when trying to slurp some milk, they'll move on to other planets, not wasting any biomass for planets that they might barely break even on, leaving each faction to go separate ways as they wouldn't really battle one another here. But on the off chance that they continue to run each other again and again, what would happen if each hive mind understood the goal of one another? Now, we have two factions that operate incredibly similarly to one another. The Vex, who seek to make all others Vex, and the Tyranids, who seek to consume and expand to be all-encompassing in the universe. Even besides the ideas of calculating existence and possibilities, what happens when these two hive minds meet on the battlefield? If a Tyranid swarm fleet landed on Venus, if the two met in combat, I believe something strange would happen right away. See, there is one Guardian out there that did something not unlike what we'd expect the Tyranids to do. Cobber, the Titan who programmed the Aegis Shield into a vault of glass infused with his actual light, while trapped within the vault, drank the Radiolarian milk within, something that corrupted his form and essentially turned him into a Guardian Vex hybrid before eventually going full Vex, somewhere in the garden. We know this from lore entries where Cobber refers to himself first as K for Cobber, KV for Cobber Vex, and finally just V for Vex. So pitting these two everlasting forces against one another would not lead to one defeating or eliminating the opposing side. At least, I don't think so. I believe that the Great Devourer and the Transcendent Mind would combine in some strange way. As flesh and metal and maths and teeth collide in an unholy evolution of perfection. The ultimate calculator, the grandest evolutionary force in all of existence. The Tyrant Vex. As Tyranids attempt to consume or devour Vex architecture, the plasmatic milk that makes up in some part their physical form, especially in Vex homeworlds or their special creations like the Vault of Glass, the Tyranid hive mind would become integrated with that of the Vexes. As we know, Tyranids will just evolve to integrate things that should otherwise kill them, like poisonous gas or even man-made super diseases. Signals of the Vex clashing with and slowly subsuming the hive fleets into a unified organism that can calculate the perfect answer to any problem with the perfect organism to do the job. The universe would be wholly Vex, but also entirely Tyranid. Frames of flesh and metal that can change instantly on a whim and take on enemies in a battlefield. A mind that can compute every option instantly and artificially restructure their bodies to take on any fight. Running into Cabal, instant evolution to give them the tools that perfectly counter the heavy armor and explosive arsenal from the frogs. Finding the Tau have you pinned at range? Instantly form a bunch of specialized hunters who can teleport behind enemy lines with gigantic claws that rip battlesuits in half. A perfect symbiosis between the absolute mathematical logic of the Vex and the brute force evolution and unending force that is the Tyranids. A hybrid system that cannot be outthought, can never be defeated, and is destined to be the everlasting final shape at the end of everything. A combined force dedicated to consuming and integrating itself with the universe until there is nothing left of reality outside of these tyrant Vexes in existence. Until reality ends, and then they do it all again. But that is just my opinion. If you think otherwise, as if the Vex or Tyranids might take one out for one reason or another, or something else entirely, let me know down below in the comments. And if you've liked this, please consider subscribing if you want even more like this. There's a whole playlist covering all the different universe v universe breakdowns I've done, including Helldivers and Gears of War, and of course our past Destiny and Warhammer comparisons. And if you want even more, join the Patreon or become a member on YouTube for just $1 a month. Even more content and exclusive videos all just waiting for you over there. As well as, of course, getting videos early and without pesky ads. Check it out. As always, our Colorful World merch is still up. This is all for charity, so each and every shirt, jacket, or sticker is going to be donated to my local food bank. If you'd like to help me support a good cause, get your wonderfully soft shirt down below. But with all of that said, thank you very much for watching. Remember to stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.